welcome to Generation. I'm here with Coleman Hostetler, and we thought it would be a good idea, instead of doing what's normally done where the generations talk about each other, to maybe just talk to each other for a while. It just makes more sense. And right before we began, we noticed something that's different about these generations. Cole has got his phone right there on the table in
and
plain
she's got
sight.
her hard copy notes.
Hard copy notes hidden in my lap.
You did type them out though, so at least it's not like handwritten.
Right, and I did it on a laptop, so it's not like it was IBM Selectric.
That's right.
I mean, we're not that old.
See, I don't even know what that means.
Okay, good. So
I don't even know what that means.
Right, then this is definitely a bridge over troubled water. There's
At least we're trying to build the bridge.
exactly.
Versus tearing it down.
Right, and that is a problem because, the more I hear my generation talk, the more we talk about what's wrong
With the
younger generation.
I hear that too, and I've probably said stuff, and I'm a part of that generation, so I understand it. But then it also happens from the other side. Well, these old heads or whatever, it's just obviously it's disrespectful.
Right, but sometimes there are 60-year-old 3-year-olds, and so
For sure,
it's not necessarily your chronological age.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're having trouble with spiritual age, I think. Because, we've all got a birthday, and then hopefully we've always got a salvation birthday that we remember.
Right.
Whether we remember the exact calendar date, I can remember how old I was, and I know it was in the summertime at Vacation Bible School, but if you ask me the actual date, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a time period. But that's what we said in the last program, is we want to really pursue this question of salvation, since sometimes it's left in the dust with people studying Torah.
Right.
They're just obsessed with the Torah to the exclusion of the salvation message and really understanding what is the Torah for.
Right.
And who is it for? Mm-hmm. And so we were going to follow up, on the relationship you were talking about of salvation, of how you needed to seek that out for yourself.
Right.
Can you expand upon that? Like, what was the pursuit of that like for you?
I think really just coming to the realization that Torah is in addition to our salvation, not at the expense of, and just trying to incorporate that and gain the knowledge, but not lose the relationship. But I've never really been, I guess I didn't really struggle with that part as much because I wasn't super into the knowledge of everything anyways. Like, I thought it was really cool, and people would show me stuff, and it would be like different connections and stuff with the Torah that was super cool. And I always listened to it growing up. Dad would play, we had a little iPod, and we would put it on the iPod dock, and we would listen to it to go to sleep. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night if I couldn't sleep, and it would still be playing, and you would hear things. So I'm super grateful for that. But I think just trying to incorporate what it actually says versus just retaining the knowledge. And, I know this, like I might know something more than somebody else. I don't think that's the point of it at all. I mean, that's why we're supposed to constantly search it out. And I think that's why there's so many things that may not be 100% clear, is because he wants us to keep searching. He doesn't want us to know it all. It's the same back in the garden with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I mean, that there's a reason it was forbidden. He didn't want us to know everything. He wants us to know him. So if we just continue to search his heart and not just the knowledge in a book, then I think we're on a better track.
I think that's a quotable quote. I like that. He doesn't need us to know everything. He needs us to know him.
Right.
So for you...
Dang, that was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty good. Somebody needs to write that down.
Write it down. You guys need to write that down.
We need merch, right?
Merch. Yeah.
We need a t-shirt. But yeah, that's important. So as you were growing up, like at what age did it kind of be a conscious effort to pursue the relationship with him more for yourself than just as something you did with your family?
That's a good question. Honestly, like as a young teenager, I probably was the least concerned with spirituality as I could be, honestly. Just speaking as open as possible. Um, and it was at no fault of anybody else's. I just didn't take it seriously. I was like, that when I get older, then I'll deal with all that stuff. And man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But probably I had a lot of events happen in my life that led me to depression and down the wrong roads and whatnot. So coming out of that is really when I began to cultivate a real relationship, probably around, honestly, like 18 was probably when I started really taking it serious. And then, I got married at 19. So a lot of things,
I
a
do.
lot of things change when you get married, but your age is still the same. You still have only been on this earth for a certain amount of time. So really just realizing, hey, this is not a game. And I realized it more because of me being married that
Yep.
young, but I would encourage other young people, like, even if you're not married, it's not a game. We have to take every single day seriously. Our actions, the cause and effect is not just you, it's multiple people, it's people's feelings, their emotions, even their spirituality too.
Mhm.
Um, so probably really, really searching the Father about 19 years old is when I started. And I'm only 21 years old. So I grew up in this, and only for about 2 years did
That
I really take it serious. And that's really unfortunate to say, but that's probably when it really started.
What do you think there's anything, say parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, pastors, rabbis, whoever could do with young people to help that process along of feeling a sense of connection to the bigger community and therefore some responsibility to the community? Could they work on that earlier, or do you think it's just something that's going to happen organically no matter what?
I believe that everyone will at some point find that organically if they don't end up having help. But I do think there probably is ways that we could prevent a lot of pain and years of just emptiness and finding who you are. I get people say that a lot, find who you are, but really it's find who he wants you to be.
Mhm.
Um, it's it wasn't anybody's fault in my case. I I don't really know what we could do to really drive that. Maybe it was the salvation thing. Like I always knew it, but it wasn't really, I guess, talked about enough. Maybe I just took it for granted.
Mhm.
Um, but the older I get, the more I realize just how deep and important that really is. So I think if I understood that more, the sacrifice and the love that he put on the line for us, maybe I would have not gone down some of the roads that I went down,
Mhm.
um, because I wouldn't have wanted to disappoint him.
Right.
Um, and it was just a selfish way of living. But if you don't know the sacrifice that someone has given for you, then you might not feel like you owe it. And that sounds really bad now that I say it out loud, but really, like as a young teenager, you just don't, I mean, you don't think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
So we really, I guess, really need to just incorporate those conversations, try to really drill it into the younger generation of he did this for you. Everything in the Torah hinges on this. So we just I can't emphasize it enough, his love for us and what he sacrificed for us.
Yeah, that's a good point. And because I think with our generation, we can pretty much say not all were saved when they came to study Torah, but most of our generation, because of the way this happened, we'd probably been saved for years, maybe since we were 5 years old or 6 years old. And there was just like this general assumption that you wouldn't even be interested in this if you weren't saved. But with a new generation coming up, maybe we overlooked that.
And part of it too, it could be when you grow up in a like-minded community with Torah observant people and all the things, and you're almost like, what do I need to be saved from? You know what I'm saying? Like, because we didn't experience a lot of the things that your generation probably did to come into this walk, if that makes sense. And then we're growing up into it and we're doing all the right things. And we think, because we're, like we talked about in the last episode, because we're going to Shabbat every week and we're doing the feasts and keeping the feasts and the holy days and all those types things, that we're just covered. And until you accept him into your heart and then make him your personal Lord and Savior, that's just not the case. Um, and I'm sure that was explained to me. Like I said, I'm not blaming anybody for it, but that could be the reason why we see that.
Yeah. Because sometimes it feels like, when we study the Torah portions and, get down to the nitty-gritty, sometimes even on the sin offerings, like that really raises your sin awareness. Like, man, you can sin without even trying to. I wasn't even trying to do that, and I transgressed.
Right.
And as you're going through all that, you're learning. To me, it feels like I'm nourishing the salvation that he planted in me. And if I don't nourish that salvation, then it can become pretty dry and depressing. And, that might be a conversation that we should have pretty frequently, that we're learning these things. The knowledge is fine, but it's there to nourish the salvation that he did pay a very dear price for. I don't always like Hollywood productions of biblical things, but sometimes, having that vivid, can't remember which program it was. There's been so many with Yeshua, but, where they're beating him in preparation.
Maybe the Passion.
Probably.
Yeah, that was very brutal. Right.
I mean, they're just stripping the skin off his back, basically. And that is very vivid. And you want to balance an emotional response, because people see that and they're like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And maybe they want to be saved, but do they want that salvation nourished for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, probably not, because it's a heart change, then a life change, because the actions have to change too. It's not just, oh, I accept you into my heart. Now you got to live it out.
So in your typical work week, because I see you, like if I'm up at the Oneg Hall getting my stuff out of the freeze dryer or whatever, I see you out there working sometimes. In a typical work week, because you got a wife, you got a little baby, and, we're on the way.
Another one on the way. Yeah.
So in that typical work week, which you probably got a good bit of alone time, which a lot of people don't have.
I probably do.
Yeah. How do you, in that work week, how do you maintain that closeness, that relationship that you're talking about? How do you work on that? Just like anybody goes to work, how would you even work on that during a work week?
That's a good question. Well, I will say one thing that's helped me a lot is there's the Bible app, which has helped me a lot when I'm working, because I am alone. A lot of the times I can download things. I can sit and listen to things. And then when I'm alone or I don't have that going on, then I'm just like, it feels like I'm constantly just downloading all these thoughts and information on how to apply it, I guess, would be the word. So when I come in contact with somebody, what am I going to use from what I just listened to, because to me, that's the whole point. I could easily go out and be all by myself with no communication with people and do all these things, and it would be super easy. Love Yahweh and love my life and be done with it. So I feel like the people that work around people more, they definitely have a harder time than I do, but it's just taking what you read, what you listen to, and applying it, and finding what is your weakness, probably would be my advice to anybody. What's your weakness when it comes to interactions with people, when it comes to, you know, temptations or uh, just whatever the case may be, and what can you take from the word to gird up your strength? Um, I found that very, very helpful. So a typical day would be I wake up, I am not a morning person at all, but I get up at 6 o'clock every morning and I go to the gym, and I'll have the word downloading in my while I'm working out. I don't know why it helps. It's just it's steady. I feel his word just strengthens you, I guess. We'll just say that. And then when I come back, spend a few minutes with my wife and my daughter if they're awake, and then I go head on to work, and that's where everything starts, turning. Like, depending on what you read, the that morning, it's just like all these things start coming to your mind, and a lot of times I'll just write certain things down that come into my mind. I'll just take this little phone right here, go to my notes, and I'll just write down like a one word or a one liner that stuck out to me in what I read. And then I'm like, okay, how can I apply this? And how can I share this? Which I'm starting to do a lot more now, because used to I was really shy. I couldn't really talk to people, and uh, it just wasn't in my comfort zone. So I'm trying to take leaps of faith now, like with the things that are downloading. How can I uh, share that with other people? Because it's not just for you. It's to strengthen other people too. So
Yeah.
I would say that's kind of what helps me keep things turning, is really the downloading, and then the time where you just don't say anything, and where you don't, I mean, yes, pray, but I'm saying, like, sometimes you just shut up.
Mm-hmm.
Just be quiet,
Yeah.
Just listen to what he's got to say, because he's got a lot to say if you're willing to hear it. It says, um, you who have ears to hear, let them hear. So it's really just being open to what he has for you, and how do you apply it to your
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah. So you're leaving like open windows in your work day. And in a sense, you're kind of journaling, not like with a book,
Yeah,
where
in
you
a
write
way,
a
yeah.
bunch of
I
stuff,
could, yeah.
but your thoughts, you're
Mm.
recording your thoughts. And anybody can do that, which we know you can write music, you can play music. Is it working your way into that at all?
Working my way into,
Or
like,
like,
writing music,
mm-hmm,
possibly. Possibly. Different ideas can sometimes turn into a song. It's not always the case. I think if you go into it, or go throughout the day trying to collect thoughts for that specific purpose,
mm-hmm,
I don't think it's as organic as he wants it to be. The best songs come from just a random thought, maybe, and then you write it down, and then a melody comes to you, and then you kind of sing it, and then I don't know. That's how they've come for me. Or the most recent ones have been just opening up some part of the Bible. It could be any part, usually the Psalms, because obviously they're already songs, and then just kind of playing around, seeing what chords kind of fit the I guess the feeling of whatever it is you're thinking about, and then sometimes I just sing the words off the page, and then you can incorporate different psalms into one psalm, and then they all have the same common meaning. But I think as far as throughout the day, the downloading is just for what he has.
For the relationship.
Yeah, that's just the relationship part. And anything, I think there is a time and place for, writing the music and stuff like that. But if you don't have that first, I don't think you'll ever have anything worth writing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Which I'm retired now, and the work I do, I can do right here. But I remember, for 23 years, which it's really before the iPhone generation, but I would listen to teaching, or I would listen to music as I was driving, because I had almost an hour drive to work.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of people that have a long drive time, and they'll listen to podcasts, or they'll listen to the Bible. But like you said, you need to open a window of silence for him to speak to you directly, because what's the point of praying if you don't give him a chance to answer?
Right.
And he will answer. He may not answer that second, but you have to it's just like any conversation. Sometimes if there's too much empty space in a conversation, somebody feels compelled to just rush in there and say something to fill up the empty space. And we don't need to do that. But I remember I would pull over on the side of the road, and I would get an old bank deposit slip or something if I had an idea. And I would write it down there on that.
That shows the generations again.
Yeah.
You can't just pick up that phone and
I couldn't
write it down in the notes.
Hey Siri, take a message,
Yeah.
I tried that today. It didn't work.
Oh no. Sometimes she's moody.
Yeah, I don't know why she wouldn't do what I ask her to do, but sometimes she doesn't. And so I ended up having to pull over and just literally text the message. But those weren't bad times, though. That scrambling around under the seat looking for any scrap of paper, because if I get to work and I work 8 hours, I'm going to forget what he just said.
Because there's been times where you get it and you don't write it down because you think it's so good that you just won't forget it, but you will.
Yeah.
So it's very important to take the time to write it down.
Exactly. And I think no matter what generation you're in, it's figuring out in the course of your day, mapping out the course of your day and saying, where are these windows that I can open for him, for me to either speak to him, and then also allow him to speak back to me. And sometimes I may need to cut the music off. Turn the music off, turn the teaching off. You've prayed for things, give him a chance to answer, because a lot of people, they just don't like to be alone with themselves. Yeah. There's too many ways to distract yourself.
That could be one of the things that makes that work for me, is because I actually do like the alone time.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy inside my own head, but nobody else is happy when I'm in there. So, well, this has been great. It's, I think, given us some nuts and bolts of working on that relationship of salvation. And I think maybe in the next segment we could talk more about young people as they're walking in their salvation, but maybe they're gifted in something.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And they're wanting to, step up and say, I want to be responsible for something in my community. I want to feel a part. Yeah. How's that sound?
That sounds like a great idea. But before we go, you asked me what were some ways that I cultivate that relationship, and I kind of gave, some answers on that. How would you do that?
I think I do something very similar to you. A lot of times it's a matter of, which we're sitting in our house right now, I'll walk right out that door and sit on that step, maybe for 30 minutes. And it just looks like I'm looking at birds or talking to lizards sometimes. And sometimes I am talking to the lizards because they're hilarious.
Oh, wow. Do they talk back?
Well, they try to eat each other, which is incredibly entertaining. But I've had to rescue a few.
Sorry, that was dark, guys.
Yeah, it was pretty dim. But it's also a time where you can hear back, because I tend to do better outdoors than indoors in most cases. I like dirt. I like putting my feet in the dirt.
And lizards dying.
Well, there's that, but it's entertaining up until that point.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And the birds, you know, all of that. Just seeing what's going on right outside my door.
There really is something about just seeing his creation, seeing, because you can see them just praising away.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many years it was kind of, you know, a lot of drive time that's can be distracting in other ways if you're trying to drive. But just the ability to sit and not worry about feeding the dogs or anything else. Just sit there and be totally alone, maybe with a cup of coffee.
It's a good combo.
Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah.
It's not really complex or
Yeah,
super
the thing
holy.
is, there's not just some crazy formula to it all. It's just
This is what works.
it's just what works.
Yeah.
You know, just spending time.
And everybody's going to be different because of how their day goes. You
Yeah.
know.
So just find your own way.
Exactly. All right. Well, we'll see you next time. Generation to generation.